Sup, boys? So today I want to talk to you all about something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. And usually I talk about these subjects on my stream all the time, all day, for hours on end. But since I'm on a little bit of a hiatus, I suppose, I don't have a microphone to yell at right now, so this is the best that I can do. It's about 2 a.m. in my room. I put this video off. I didn't record it in the treehouse again. And I'd like to talk to you all today about social media and if it's a negative influence on people's lives or not. And this has been a conversation that a lot more people have been having recently in the recent, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years, but especially in the past week or so, because PewDiePie deleted his Twitter and also announced that he was going to take a break from YouTube next year. And I think that that kind of prompted the conversation of if social media is a negative influence on people's lives, if it's good for society or not, and everything in between those two things. And I wanted to share my thoughts on it as somebody who's, I lied to my mom and I told her I needed a computer in 2004 for homework, but the truth is I just wanted to go on MySpace. I have been one of the first people to be on social media. I have used basically every social media website since then. I have been an avid user. I'm using social media right now, and so are you because you're watching a video on YouTube. So it's one of the things that, especially nowadays, has been so ingrained in our culture and our society and just our daily lives that it's completely commonplace. And I don't know really when this happened. I think that if I had to create a specific time, it's whenever that song, the Chainsmokers song, the Selfie song, came out, where it became publicly acceptable and not weird to just randomly take pictures of yourself in public places. Because now you see people do this all the time, and it's not, you never do a double take, it's just normal. But back in the day, even like whenever social media was a newer thing, it wasn't really as common, and people thought it was more weird. But now I think that a lot of people are kind of just so ingrained in the society with social media and seeing how it affects people's lives that it's completely normal and commonplace for them to see someone taking a picture of their Taco Cabana meal. And is that a good thing or not? I think it depends on what happens after that. Personally, I think social media has a more negative influence on people that have a lower sense of self worth and a more a fuzzy understanding of who they really are. What really social media does, and I was trying to create a metaphor for this, and I originally looked at it as water, because water, you need some of it to live, but if you have too much of it, you'll drown. But of course, you don't need social media to live, despite what middle schoolers might tell you. But I think a much better analogy is alcohol. Alcohol is something I don't drink at all, but for many people, people drink alcohol and it enriches and enhances their lives. But to a certain point, if you drink too much alcohol, it can depreciate and destroy your life. And I think social media is the exact same way. I think that social media is completely optional. You can live your life without any social media, be a complete normie, or whatever you want to call it, and that's fine. But a lot of people do use social media, and I think a sparing use of it or a healthy use of it is actually a good thing. I feel like it's a beautiful thing for me to be able to keep up with friends that I've had in high school and just see how they've grown up and how their lives are. Maybe I never talk to them again, but it's always really nice to be able to see someone that you used to be friends with and you shared memories with grow up to actually have a good life and be happy. I think that's a great thing. So to say that social media is universally bad, I think is very reductive and completely untrue. However, I do think social media does have a number of very, very negative side effects, and it's created a culture of people who, it's created kind of a grievance culture, and this is a little bit of a buzzword, right? So I want to kind of quantify and, clarify what I really mean by that. But the first thing I want to talk about is the people that are mostly affected by social media, and I think that's young people. And by young people, I don't mean myself. I'm 29. I usually, whenever I'm saying young people, I'm gonna be meaning people that are like 23 and under for just a rough number. And more specifically than 23 and under, I think that women and girls are more adversely affected by social media because you talk about like in society, what is a good thing about a guy? If he's smart, if he's funny, if he makes a lot of money, and these are things that are more intrinsic, right? These are things that you can't just see on the outside, but you think about what makes like what are the positives in like popular culture about women, and this is changing a little bit, but for the most part, it's being attractive. Women are judged much more on their appearance than men are, although men are judged on their appearance, don't get me wrong. Double standard, squad W, and all of that. But let's also be real, women get it a lot worse than guys do, and it matters a lot more for women. So, whenever you have a girl that's 18 or 19 and she's posting on her Instagram and she only gets 70 likes, and one person calls her ugly, and then she looks at some other model who has 10,000, 100,000, a million followers, it's hard not to feel inferior. It's hard not to feel a little bit of depression. It's hard not to feel like you don't have it. It's hard not to feel like you're not good enough. And I think that it's something that's even more prevalent in younger women and girls, basically, than older people. I think the more naive and the more young, and basically the inverse correlation here is the more that social media can affect you in a bad way, is inversely correlated with the lack of someone's self-confidence and internal self-image. So you have girls that are like 11, 12, 13, and they're just first learning and, like trying to look pretty and be attractive, etc. And this girl sees a picture of Kylie Jenner, and this girl is naive. She's 11 years old. She doesn't know that Kylie Jenner had 6 surgeries and 2 graphics artists go ahead and Photoshop and touch up her picture and Facetune her picture before she posted on Instagram. The only thing this girl knows is that Kylie Jenner is beautiful and she's not. And how do you think that makes her feel? It makes her feel like she's fucking worthless. And I've seen a lot of people go through this. And of course, this isn't something that only happens with 11-year-old girls. I think that it happens with people all along the spectrum. It's very easy to find somebody on social media that's doing better than you are, compare yourself to that person, and then consider yourself a failure. And I think that's what a lot of people have done. And unfortunately, I think that we're all guilty of that to some degree. But social media, in the other direction, creates a bit of a food chain. And what I mean by that is that while you can also find people that are doing better than you, it's very easy to do that, especially if, depending on where you're at, it's also not that hard to find people that are doing worse. It's like, well, I must be a nerd. I play World of Warcraft all day, but at least I'm not a furry. Or, well, I go to college for, some bullshit degree, but at least, I'm not going to community college. And then those people are looked down on by people in better colleges. And there's always a food chain, a pecking order. And I think what that's really kind of created is a way for people to kind of categorize themselves in society. And one thing that's always universal about this is that people are usually not where they think they belong. So that means that or where they want to belong. I think that's an even better term. There are people who think that they have too much, right? A certain level of imposter syndrome. But then there's also people who don't think that they have enough, and they just feel like they should have this or they should have that, and it creates a lot of jealousy and envy and discontent in those people. And I think that that's one of the different impulses that you see whenever you see the type of vitriol, like an angry behavior that social media facilitates. And you can look at it on YouTube comments, you can look at it on stream chat, right, on Twitch. I think it's very easy to see that. But also, it's everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, everything. And the amount of vitriol and anger that people have, and the fact that social media allows them to express that with relatively no risk, has created a culture of extreme vitriol, extreme in general. It's no longer acceptable for you to have opinions that are, like it's even a meme, like both sides is a meme, right? Enlightened, centrist, etc. And this is for politics. We're not going to get into politics, but I'm just going to use this as an example where there are plenty of examples and plenty of times where that's a completely reasonable thing to think. Oftentimes it is. You're stuck between two extremes and you're trying to find yourself in the middle of the two of those. And in doing so, you find yourself at odds with both sides. And I find that it's kind of an all or nothing scenario, and it's been something that's been unhealthy for, I think, everyone. I think it's pushed people more towards extremes in everything, not just politics, but in conversations in general. Because it's so easy to completely overreact to things, and the entire media online is built around overreacting. I mean, you can look at the way people act on stream. Myself, of course there's a certain degree of overreacting with that, and with every other streamer it's the same thing. You go on a news website, and it's that somebody said this stunning thing, and this person said something like, oh wow, I really hope that child hunger ends in Africa. It's like, wow, what a brave and amazing thing to say. But something that's completely nonchalant, or something that's not really a big deal, is completely blown up to a degree that's completely unnecessary. And why is that? Well, it's simple. The reason is because, and this is also with outrage too. So, this is why the news stations talk, they spend 4 days talking about a kidnapping or a shooting, and they spend 4 minutes talking about, geopolitical conflicts in Syria. Number one is that people don't understand it, that they're trying to market to, and keep that word in mind, market to. But also, on top of that, it doesn't elicit that visceral social and emotional response in the same way. It basically engages a different part of your brain. And that other type of your brain is not really as prone to buying things. It's not really as prone to impulses. And impulses are usually what people prey on in terms of getting people to buy things, having them do impulsive decisions. And whenever you have like these news stories and everything that are built completely around, maybe not fake outrage, but selective outrage and exaggerated outrage, it's like you read a news article and it says there's a massive pushback about some sort of a change that's happened with something, and they show a picture of a tweet and it's got 26 likes. Massive? I don't know about that. But, for them, that's a news story because it's something that they can create a salacious headline around, and, they can get people engaged on an emotional level with. And I think that's why social issues and things like that are pushed so heavily by the media. At least one reason is because they engage people on an emotional level, and doing that keeps them more engaged with the news stations and the news websites, and in turn it keeps them more engaged with the ads, and that keeps them more engaged with clicking on the ads and making the websites money. I think that usually, if money is a factor in something, it's usually the reason. If you It's like you very rarely see people who make money on coincidence. If there's money involved and you're making money off of something, it's not convenient, it's not a coincidence, it's a correlation, and it's a reason. That's my opinion. So, social media, going back to that, and I'm going to tie this all together. Hopefully, you guys can see where I'm coming from. Is that social media drives people to those extremes. It creates a anonymous environment for a person to be able to talk about things in the most extreme way that they want, and also it gives people the ability to isolate themselves. And so that means that if you only want to hear about people that agree with you on 100% of everything, you can do that. You can create that world for yourself. And I don't necessarily think that should go away, because I think people should be able to have the right to curate what they do and don't want to see on a personal level. But at the same time, it does have negative side effects. And I think that a real life example of this is that you can go to different, like different church groups, for example, and you can have people that, they believe the earth is 6,000 years old, and they have all these crazy views, and it's because they live in such a enclave of people, and they never interface outside of that enclave, and they never really challenge their beliefs or think anything else besides what they were taught whenever they were a kid, and that's basically it. I think that's with everything. It's not just a religious thing. This isn't a dig on religious people. People do this with everything. Warcraft people do this. Oh, well, I block people that play the game in this certain way. And it's very easy for people to create echo chambers. I think that's one very big factor for it. And I've seen this happen more and more recently. And again, I don't really think this is something that you should get rid of, but I think also at the same time it's something to keep in mind. Another thing is that I believe that social media acts as kind of a mirror for yourself. And if a person has a very, very bad self image, social media gives that person the ability to amplify that. And it gives them the ability to constantly see flaws in themselves, constantly compare themselves to other people. But for a person with a good self image and who has like a intrinsic sense of self worth and is happy and successful and satisfied at least with who they are, I don't think social media has as many adverse effects. And you see this a lot. And of course, this is also correlated as well. Like people nowadays are much more isolated than they used to be. You used to, like, if you wanted to go out and hang out with your friends, you'd walk outside and your friends would be across the street and you'd walk over their house and there you go. And it was a very different time. But nowadays, since everything is so compartmentalized and people are doing everything online, you don't really have as much organic social interaction, much more of it in real life. What I mean is in real life social interaction. You don't have as much of that. And I think that's it's a very, very bad thing. I think that especially younger people need to have that, because if you don't have other people that kind of build your sense of self-worth and who you are off of, and you're doing it off of the internet, it's a very dangerous thing whenever things don't go your way. And you've seen that happen with a lot of people, especially people who create content online. And whenever things don't go the way they want them to, it's much harder for people who don't have an external support group to be able to recover from that and kind of take that kind of stuff in stride. And I think that's what's really happened with many people. And this isn't something just with content creators, it's with everyone, just to different varying degrees. But I do believe that social media kind of acts as a mirror. And what that mirror shows is, in a way, that person's true thoughts. It's almost like an intrusive thoughts situation where social media has the ability to bring out the best and the worst of people, to show people's true human nature. It can show the bloodthirsty, vitriolic feeding frenzy of people that are so furious and angry that some person thought that they could possibly tweet this ridiculous thing that, we're going to harass them and make them leave the internet. But at the same time, it also is the way that Mr. Beast raised millions of dollars to save trees in the rainforest. And I think that's really what's so interesting about the conversation, is the fact that social media isn't a universally good or a bad thing. It's basically a tool, and it's a mirror that you look into. And if you have a bad self image, if you've got a bad state of mind, if you're unhappy, and you seek things out to reinforce that, you'll find them. And vice versa, you'll find that too. And I think that's really the most interesting thing about social media. I do think also social media has created a number of like cultural expectations and different types of norms that I think are kind of unhealthy. One of them is the idea that it's kind of virtuous to allow yourself to receive harassment. I've seen this a lot, especially around like YouTube and Twitch. I don't really believe that it's necessarily virtuous or applaudable or positive to allow people to harass you or say negative things about you. While having a thick skin is important, I think also having a degree of self-respect is important too. And why is that really important? It's because what that really kind of ties into is my second point, is that I think social media, and especially recently now with like Twitter and boycotts and call out culture, etc., Twitter has created, and not Twitter, just like all of the online spheres, have created effectively acceptable bullying, acceptable harassment. This person did X, so we can do the same thing to them. It's the same thing as, one person is being an asshole to somebody else, and then everybody gangs up on the person that's being an asshole, and then they're an asshole to him, and they feel like they're doing this as some sort of righteous behavior, but the fact is they're doing exactly what they're complaining about. It's the same thing. But the idea that certain people are acceptable targets of harassment or abuse based off of different things that they say, I think that on a very, very extreme level, that's probably true. But for the other 95%, I don't think it is at all. I think people are just really looking for a person that they can abuse with impunity and say negative things about with impunity. And you can see this. I mean, this is a very common thing throughout all of history. I mean, you have the Salem witch trials, you have all kinds of other things in history. I don't know if I could sit here and think about them. I probably could think of a half a dozen, but just different, McCarthyism and throughout the years of different ways that people create criteria in which they then allow other people to harass or abuse or defame or hurt someone based off of that criteria. This person is an acceptable target. This person is not an acceptable target. This person did this, so now we can do that to him, and it's okay if we do that to him because he did this. I think social media creates that in a lot of ways, and it's very unhealthy. I don't think that it's helped anyone out, and I think that it's just gonna degrade society. So I think that to tie all this together, um, very clearly, it's good and a bad thing. It's not simple at all, and I think that the nuanced answer is why this video is 20 minutes long, and a lot of people probably wouldn't watch it unless it was like, a 6-minute video or a 3-minute video with tidbits. But the fact is that the 20-minute video is, there was reason why some videos are 20 minutes long is because some topics require that much time to talk about, and there's a lot of nuance and things to them. And I think that in social media, in a Twitter-based world where ideas and conversations and thoughts need to be 140 or 280 characters long, videos have to be this long, and these different things, headlines have to be this long. The nuance in conversation and the nuance in language and ideas is often lost, and I think that's also because you're trying to appeal to a very, very large audience, and in doing so you do have to tone down at least a lot of the language that you use because it might not be accessible for them. And I think that in the process and in the pursuit of appealing to as many people as possible, you end up doing everyone a disservice by not talking about things in the way that they deserve. And that's what I think has happened a lot, is that going back even to what I was saying at the beginning, is that you get hit going both ways. If you introduce nuance into things, it complicates that for people, and people don't like to have complication. They like to have good or bad, evil or good. And the truth is that there's mostly gray area, and people operate in that gray area 9 times out of 10. And talking about that gray area to me is much more interesting, but to a lot of companies is much less profitable. And I think that's really what the culture and the society is promoted, because you have to also remember that social media is a profit. I mean, these are all for-profit companies. This is a profitable business. This is a business. So it's removed a lot of the nuance out of conversation. It's made people much more vitriolic and angry and extreme. It's given people the ability to live in echo chambers and only interface with the people that they agree with, and not have to ever challenge their ideas. But it's also given a lot of people the ability to express themselves in a world that they would have never had the option to otherwise. It's given people the ability to keep track of their friends and keep track of their family that they might not really have the ability to do so in the same way if they didn't have social media. Facebook is great for that. Facebook is not great to see if Aunt Kathy posts another racist minion meme. No, it's not. But there's the good with the bad. And I think that social media in general is still something that society is still trying to work out. It's the same as if you watch a sci-fi movie and they've discovered immortality, or they've discovered a new race of aliens, and the way that they've built a morality system around that race of aliens or around that immortality or whatever type of scientific advancement they have, the moral system around that is very often disgusting and weird and contrived. And why is that? It's because society and human culture hasn't necessarily evolved, and us as a society haven't moved forward enough to process and cultivate and digest social media in a healthy way. People are still inventing the rules. People are still reinventing the rules, and even inventing what the game is to begin with. And I think that as time goes on and society parses out social media, you'll see more and more about things that are more considered acceptable and also not acceptable. And I think it's just got to be a matter of time. And the more and more that social media is part of our culture, the better I think it will probably get, but it'll maybe get a little bit worse before it gets better. Anyway, guys, that's my thoughts. Those are my opinions. So I really appreciate you guys watching if you've made it this far, and I'd like to hear what you think. So I'll be reading the comments. So thanks a lot for watching, and see you later. Peace.